What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Craftsman mower, and the problem is that it leaks gas from the carburetor and it won't start. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this mower. However, it may not be the exact repair that you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Now, this is your basic lawnmower. You put oil and gas in it, you press the primer bulb a few times, you pull the rope once or twice and start mowing. However, what happened to this mower was after putting gas into the tank, it started to leak out of the air filter assembly. And of course, it didn't start after that. So more than likely, the carburetor has a serious problem, and also there's a chance that gas has made it into the oil, so I'll need to do an oil change if we want this engine to last. Before I start, I want to check the fluids in the mower. Of course, the gasoline is all gone because of the carburetor problem, so I don't have to worry about that. There is oil in the engine, but it's a tad above full, which is fine, and the color is excellent on the dipstick. However, later on, you'll see that looks can be deceiving. The air filter is pretty dirty, but the worst part is it was soaked with gas at some point. Now, these are only a couple of dollars online, so I'm definitely going to replace this later on when I know the mower is working. Now, while the filter is out of the way, I'll spray some starting fluid in the carburetor and make sure the engine still runs. Now that I know that it starts and runs, I'll remove the filter base and the carburetor and inspect it for any obvious problems. After removing the bowl, I can see there's a lot of residue at the bottom, so it's gonna need a good cleaning. This is what happens when you leave gas in your mower over a long period of time. Now, the bowl nut is also the fuel jet, and when it's clogged up, it will not allow the engine to start. Now, I need to clean up the buildup on it and clear the jet of any obstructions, but the bigger problem is that the float and the needle are stuck in the down position. Now, this is why the carburetor was leaking in the first place. Now, more than likely, the needle is stuck in place, so we'll need to remove the pin, the float, and then try to get the needle out. Now, I've seen worse deposits in this, and I have saved them before, but the bigger problem is the needle seat and the needle. If these two are damaged, then the carburetor will leak and cause a lot of problems. These problems can include the engine randomly shutting off and not being able to be restarted for a while, or even engine damage from gas leaking into the engine oil. The time it takes to clean every component and do it right is quite a lot. However, if you have lots of time, then definitely go for it. Just don't be surprised if you have problems later on. Now, something you may have to watch out for is not to get carburetor cleaner on the rubber bowl gasket or the needle seat. Now, the cleaner will start to break these down and you'll have more problems later on, so be very careful on how you use the spray can. Next, I'll clean the brass jet and then try clearing the holes with some carburetor cleaner. If you want to use some compressed air, that would be even better. After everything is as clean as you can get it, try and reassemble the carburetor and see if you might have any problems. And unfortunately, there's still quite a bit of buildup where the needle goes, so be very careful when trying to clean this part as you don't want to damage the needle seat. Now, another reason why your carburetor might be leaking is that the float has a hole in it and it will not float on top of the gas and shut off the gas from the tank. In this situation, either replace the float or the entire carburetor. After putting the needle and the float back on the carburetor, I realized there's a big problem. The needle seat has swollen from ethanol gas, and now the needle and float are not closing off like it's supposed to. The float is not resting parallel with the bowl gasket, so it's actually closing off too soon, and this is going to make the mower shut off only after a few minutes of running. Now, I can replace the swollen seat with a new one, but the success rate is rather low. The easiest thing to do is just replace the entire carburetor. Now, the carburetor is only $12 shipped to my door, and the success rate is almost 100%. I don't think I've ever had one of these not work for me. You might be opposed to where this carburetor was made, so if you can, find one that was made somewhere else. Now, inside this particular box, we have, of course, a new carburetor and a new O-ring and a primer gasket, which is very important. Before I install the new carburetor, I want to compare them and make sure they look very similar. Now, before I install this new carburetor, I want to take the bowl off and show you how the float is supposed to look. As you can see, the float is almost parallel with the black bowl gasket. This is how it's supposed to look. After that, I'll put the bowl and the nut back on, and then I'll install it onto the engine. I also want to drain the oil and put some fresh oil into the engine. Now, this is the easiest way to ensure that your engine will last a long time. That and using treated 100% gas, of course. Now, remember how the oil looked on the dipstick? Well, it's a lot worse once you pour it out, so it's a good thing I'm changing it. The only thing I can say is don't overfill your oil. Most engines don't need more than 16 to 20 ounces depending upon your engine, so make sure you find out before you pour a whole 32 ounces into it. Now, before I install the new carburetor, I want to remove the old O-ring and put the new one on. Then reconnect the governor linkage to the carburetor and then slide it onto the intake tube. Now, I'm not sure what's going on with this fuel line, but I'm going to replace this line with a more conventional 1/4-inch fuel line instead. So here's the primer gasket, and the problem is that when you replace this gasket, it won't completely seal against the carburetor or the primer base. So the easiest thing to do is use gasket sealant or something like that. Now, the gasket sealant is very sticky, so it really doesn't need time to cure like it would with RTV. This will seal up any air gaps so the primer works in pushing fuel into the carburetor's throat. After installing the air filter base to the carburetor, press the primer bulb a few times and make sure some fuel comes out of the carburetor's throat. Now, this one seems to be working fine, so let's try starting it. So it seems to work like it's supposed to, so the next thing I'll do is replace the air filter and the cover. Now, I want to increase the engine speed, so to do that, I'm going to start the engine and then pull on the governor spring anchor just a bit, nothing crazy, and then replace the black cover on top of it. Well, everything seems to work just fine, and hopefully it gets stored properly at the end of fall, and it should start up with little to no fuss in the springtime. So my question is, would you have changed the oil because of the way it looked on the dipstick the first time? Now, it didn't look fresh on the dipstick, but it didn't look that bad at all. However, once I emptied it out onto a tray, it looked very dirty and it definitely needed to be replaced. Now, I know what I would have done, but I'm more curious about what you would have done. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask any questions, and I hope to see you in my next video.